The millionaire saved her life and brought her home. But when he returned, she was gently feeding his twin boys like a mother. "Hi, my beautiful family. It's your Mr. Peter." Before the story begins, I just want to speak this prayer over your life. Not as a routine, but as a gift, soft, warm, and full of love for you. May peace settle into your heart like a quiet song. May today be softer than yesterday, and may your burdens feel lighter than you feared. I pray that love visits you in gentle ways, a kind word, a sweet memory, a smile that stays. May healing flow through every part of your life, and may joy find you when you least expect it. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. You are loved more than words can ever say. Now, my beautiful family, I want to speak to you from my heart. I know some of you feel the introductions are getting too long or too familiar, and that's okay. I understand. I hear you. You can skip this part if you like, but please, I beg you with love, don't skip the story. Don't leave in the middle. Every word in this story was written for you, not for numbers, not for clicks, but to hold your heart. And now, tell me softly, how did James do today? He's carrying my voice while I rest. Not perfectly, but with all his heart. If he touched you, let us know. If not, I'm here. I'll always listen. So please, with love, not pressure, like this video. Drop a kind comment. Share it with someone who needs love today. Let the world feel what I feel every time I speak to you. A family filled with warmth, honesty, and unshakable love. Let's begin the story. With all my heart, always.
Death had a way of making time feel both endless and stolen. Craig Jansen sat in his dusty pickup outside Riverside Construction, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. Through the windshield, he watched his crew loading equipment, men with families to go home to, wives who would ask about their day, children who would run to the door when they heard their father's truck. 8 days since Elena's funeral, and Craig still couldn't figure out how the world kept spinning when his had stopped completely. His phone buzzed. Boys asking when Daddy comes home, made mac and cheese. Raphael won't eat. Gabriel and Raphael, 4 years old, asking questions with no good answers. "When is Mommy coming back from heaven?" Gabriel had whispered that morning while Craig struggled to braid his hair, small fingers clutching Craig's work shirt. Raphael had simply stared at Elena's favorite coffee mug, "World's Best Mom," painted in childish letters, sitting untouched on the counter, his silence more devastating than tears. How do you tell 4-year-olds their whole world just ended? Craig shifted into drive. 6:47 p.m. Another day of pretending he knew how to be both parents to boys who needed their mama more than air. The October sun hung low over the industrial district. Craig pulled onto Riverside Drive, muscle memory guiding him home while his mind wandered to the impossible task waiting, being present for his sons when he felt like a ghost. That's when he saw her. A young woman walking directly into the path of an 18-wheeler barreling down the road at 50 miles per hour. "Jesus, listen, lady." Craig's voice erupted as he slammed his brakes and threw the truck into park. The woman moved like a sleepwalker, chestnut hair catching dying light as she stepped off the sidewalk without looking, without any awareness that death raced toward her in a massive Peterbilt. The horn blared like a banshee's wail, but she didn't hear anything. Not the horn, not Craig's shouts, not the screech of brakes as the trucker tried stopping 40 tons of steel. Craig's boots hit asphalt running, time dilated, seconds stretching as he sprinted toward her. 50 yards to the girl, 30 yards to impact. Physics warred with desperation. He wasn't going to make it. But his legs kept pumping, lungs burning as he pushed harder than ever. Because watching a stranger about to die, Craig realized something that shook him. He couldn't save Elena, couldn't save his boys from losing their mother. But maybe he could save this one person. "Move!" he bellowed, reaching her as the chrome grille closed in. Craig threw his frame against her, sending them tumbling as the Peterbilt roared past, missing by inches, wind ripping at their clothes. Pain shot through Craig's ankle as they hit concrete. His arms, scraped raw, burned as he rolled to shield the girl. For a moment they lay breathing heavily, her trembling beneath him. "Are you hurt?" Craig pushed up, ignoring his throbbing ankle. The girl, maybe 22, stared with wide, vacant eyes. Pretty, with smooth, dark skin and delicate features. But those eyes held trauma Craig recognized. I don't," she stammered. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe." Craig helped her sit, checking for injuries. "What's your name?" "Lily," she whispered, then crumpled. "I don't know why I wasn't looking." "Sometimes we don't," Craig said softly, understanding more than she knew. "Oh my God, are you both all right?" A woman's voice, rich and warm with a southern accent, cut through his awareness. Craig looked up into the most beautiful brown eyes he'd ever seen, deep amber flecked with gold, intelligent and concerned. The woman kneeling beside them was stunning, natural black hair in a simple ponytail, skin glowing in streetlight. "I saw everything," she continued, hands moving with practiced efficiency, checking them for injuries. "That was incredibly brave and stupid. I'm Krista Hagman, and I'm a nurse." "Well, was a nurse." Her voice caught. "Let me help." As Krista cleaned his wounds with surprising gentleness, Craig studied her face. Beautiful, yes, but something else, sadness mirroring his own. When her fingers brushed his skin, he felt warmth he hadn't experienced since Elena's death. "Lily, honey, do you have somewhere safe to go?" Krista asked. Lily shook her head, tears streaming. "My boyfriend kicked me out, said I was too much trouble. I don't have anywhere." Craig and Krista exchanged glances. Despite being strangers, they seemed to communicate something unspoken, shared understanding of being lost and alone. "You can't stay on the streets," Krista said firmly. "I have a house," Craig found himself saying. "If you need somewhere to rest, figure things out." He looked at Krista. "Both of you. I have twin boys, so it's not quiet, but it's safe." Krista studied his face carefully. "You don't know us." "I don't," Craig admitted, "but I know what it's like to need help. Besides, you just helped a stranger. That tells me everything about who you are." Something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or acknowledgement that sometimes life throws people together for reasons they don't understand. "I should look at that ankle," Krista said, catching up as he limped toward his truck. "I'm a nurse." "Well, I was. Before ... She didn't finish, but Craig heard unspoken pain. He nodded toward his truck. 10 minutes to my house." The drive was quiet except for Lily's sniffles. Craig found his eyes drifting to Krista's profile as she stared out the window. In dashboard light, he could see elegant neckline, fingers twisting nervously. There was a story there, pain and loss matching his own. His driveway revealed a modest 2-story house with a yard desperately needing attention. Craig realized with embarrassment he hadn't mowed since before. "It's not much," he began. "It's perfect," Krista said simply. He unlocked the door, immediately met by Mrs. Patterson's concerned face. "Craig, dear, you're bleeding. What happened?" Her eyes widened, seeing Krista and Lily. "Small accident. These ladies helped." Craig managed a tired smile. "How were the boys?" "Angels, as always. Fed them dinner. They're upstairs with building blocks." She gathered her things. "Gabriel asked about you 3 times." After Mrs. Patterson left, Craig stood in his living room with 2 strangers, suddenly unsure. The house felt different with other adults, less like a tomb, more like a home where people lived. "The boys are probably awake," he said. "They don't sleep well since—" He stopped, realizing he was sharing something deeply personal. "Since their mother died," Krista finished gently. Craig's head snapped up. How did you— wedding ring tan line? The way you talk about them. The sadness in your eyes. Krista's voice was understanding. I recognize someone who's lost everything. Before Craig could respond, small footsteps thundered downstairs. Gabriel appeared, hair sticking up, Raphael close behind. Daddy! Gabriel launched at Craig's legs, and Craig winced as his ankle took impact. Hey, buddy! Craig lifted Gabriel, heart swelling at genuine happiness in his son's face. This is Krista and Lily. They're staying tonight. Raphael hung back, studying newcomers with serious 4-year-old eyes. Krista knelt to his level. Hi, Raphael. I like your pajamas. Are those dinosaurs? Raphael nodded shyly, then whispered, T-Rexes are my favorite. Mine too, Krista smiled, and Craig watched his reserved son's face light up. Are you hungry? Krista asked, looking toward the kitchen. I could make something. Craig started to protest. She was a guest, but his stomach growled loudly. That would be— He began, then stopped, overwhelmed by unexpected emotion. Really nice. As Krista moved toward the kitchen with natural confidence, Gabrielle still in Craig's arms and Raphael trailing the intriguing stranger, Craig felt something shift inside his chest. For the first time in 8 days, his house felt like it might become a home again. He didn't know this woman would change everything. Couldn't know she carried her own devastating loss. All he knew was that for the first time since Elena's death, he didn't feel completely alone. Sometimes that's exactly how love begins, not with passion or grand gestures, but with simple recognition that two broken hearts might be stronger beating together. Chapter 2. The Weight of Yesterday. The kitchen filled with warm aromas of homemade tomato basil soup and golden grilled cheese as Krista moved with practiced efficiency. She located ingredients pushed to forgotten depths of Craig's refrigerator, things that spoke of Elena's meal planning and family dinners that stopped happening 8 days ago. Craig sat at the oak table with Gabriel on his lap, and Raphael pressed against his side, watching this stranger breathe life back into their neglected home. Lily huddled across from him, trembling hands wrapped around chamomile tea Krista had found in dusty pantry recesses. How did you know where everything was? Craig asked, genuinely curious as Krista ladled soup with someone who belonged their competence. Kitchen instinct, Krista replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Most families organize the same way. Spices near stove, dishes close to sink. She paused, hand stilling on the ladle. I used to cook a lot. That past tense carried weight Craig recognized, the way certain words bore the full burden of a life that used to be. This is really good, Raphael whispered, dipping his sandwich into soup. It was the most he'd spoken to anyone outside family since the funeral. My mama taught me, Krista said, settling beside him. She always said food was love you could taste. Gabriel looked up from his bowl, soup coating his upper lip. Our mama used to make us soup when we were sick, but she can't anymore because she went to heaven. The silence that followed was heavy with grief that children state so matter-of-factly, not understanding how those simple words can shatter adult hearts. Craig felt his throat close, familiar helplessness washing over him. I bet she made really good soup, Krista said gently, reaching over to wipe Gabriel's face. And I bet she loved making it for you boys. She did, Raphael nodded solemnly. She used to cut sandwiches into triangles and make faces with soup crackers. That sounds like a mama who loved you very much. Krista's voice was soft, understanding. Those are beautiful memories to keep. Craig watched, amazed, as his sons continued eating, without the usual tears accompanying any mention of their mother. Something about Krista's gentle acknowledgement of Elena's memory seemed to comfort them. After dinner, as Craig tucked the boys into their shared bedroom, Gabriel grabbed his sleeve with small, sticky fingers. Daddy, Is the nice lady staying? Just for tonight, buddy. She's helping take care of Miss Lily. I like her, Raphael added from his twin bed. She smells like cookies and doesn't look sad when we talk about Mama. Craig's heart clenched. Do other people look sad? Mrs. Patterson gets weird and changes the subject, Gabriel explained with 4-year-old bluntness. And Grandma Ruth cries every time, but Krista just listens. After reading their story, Craig returned downstairs to find Krista washing dishes while Lily curled under a throw blanket, finally peaceful enough to sleep. You don't have to do that, Craig said, moving to take the sponge. I want to, she replied, but didn't resist when he took over washing while she dried. They worked in comfortable silence, the domestic rhythm feeling both foreign and familiar. She's been through something terrible, Krista said quietly, glancing toward Lily. You both have, Craig observed, noting how Krista's hands trembled slightly, drying a plate. Krista stilled, then set the plate down carefully. What makes you say that? The way you handled everything tonight, like you understand trauma from inside. Craig rinsed the last bowl, voice gentle. The way you talked to my boys about their mother. You've lost someone too. For a long moment, Krista didn't respond. When she finally looked at him, her brown eyes glistened with unshed tears. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who recognizes the signs. Craig dried his hands, giving her space but staying close enough that she knew he was listening. You don't have to tell me anything, but if you want to, I understand what it's like to carry something heavy. Krista sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly looking fragile. Craig poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her, waiting. I lost a baby, she whispered finally, voice barely audible above the refrigerator's hum. 8.5 months pregnant. My daughter, Sophia. There were complications, severe preeclampsia that came on suddenly, and I needed emergency surgery. But my husband... She stopped, pressing her lips together as if the words were acid. He wouldn't take you to the hospital, Craig guessed, cold fury building. Krista shook her head, bitter laugh escaping with no humor. Damon said he was closing a multi-million-dollar deal that couldn't wait. Had an important dinner meeting with investors that would change our future. Told me to call an ambulance or take a taxi if I was really worried. Tears spilled over, running silently as she relived the nightmare. By the time I managed to get there, I drove myself, bleeding and barely conscious. It was too late. My little girl, Sophia, she didn't make it. Jesus, Krista. Craig reached across the table, covering her trembling hand with his calloused one. I'm so sorry for your loss. It was only 6 days ago, she continued, voice breaking with fresh grief. 6 days, and he's already served me with divorce papers. Said he couldn't handle the drama and that maybe this was a sign we weren't meant to be parents together. She looked up with eyes full of devastating pain. Craig felt fury building, not just at the cruel stranger who had abandoned this incredible woman, but at the unfairness of it all. Here was someone who had just saved a stranger, who had walked into his broken home and brought comfort to his grieving children. Elena died in a car accident, he said quietly, sharing his own pain in return. Some drunk driver ran a red light. The boys were supposed to be with her, but Raphael had a stomach bug, so she left them with me. His voice caught. I've been grateful for that stomach bug every day since, and I hate myself for being grateful. Because it feels like a betrayal to feel anything but pure grief, Krista finished, understanding immediately. Exactly. Craig's thumb moved unconsciously across her knuckles. The boys keep asking when she's coming home, and I don't know how to explain that she's not. Ever. How do you tell 4-year-olds that their whole world just ended? You don't, Krista said softly. You just love them through it, one day at a time, until they start to understand that the world didn't end. It just changed. They sat in the quiet kitchen, hands connected across the table, sharing the weight of their separate tragedies. Outside, the neighborhood had settled into sleep, but neither made any move to break the moment. For the first time since their respective losses, they didn't feel completely alone with their grief. "I keep thinking I should have done something different," Craig admitted. "Left work earlier that day, gone with her to the store, something. And I keep thinking I should have left him years ago when I first saw how selfish he was," Krista replied. "But we can't change what happened. We can only decide what to do now." "What are you going to do now?" Craig asked. Krista was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was stronger, more determined. "I'm going to make sure Damon pays for what he did. Not just to me, but to Sophia. He cost her life with his selfishness, and he's going to live with consequences." She looked directly at Craig. "And I'm going to figure out how to keep living, even though I'm not sure I remember how." "I know the feeling," Craig said. "The boys need me to keep living, but most days I'm just surviving." "You're doing better than you think," Krista assured him. "Your sons are beautiful, well-loved little boys. That doesn't happen by accident." As the clock chimed midnight, Craig realized they'd been talking for hours. The emotional exhaustion was evident in both their faces, but neither seemed ready to break the connection they'd forged. "I should let you get some sleep," Craig said reluctantly, though he made no move to leave. "Probably," Krista agreed, but she didn't move either. "Craig?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For tonight, for listening, for making me feel human again." "Thank you for bringing life back into this house," he replied honestly. "The boys smiled tonight. Really smiled. Really smiled. I was starting to think they'd forgotten how." They finally separated, Craig showing Krista to the guest room. As he lay in his own bed later, staring at the ceiling, Craig found himself thinking not about Elena for the first time in 8 days, but about the woman sleeping down the hall, a woman who understood loss, who had held his broken children and made them feel safe, who had shared her own devastating pain and somehow made his feel less isolating. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time since the accident, Craig fell asleep without the crushing weight of loneliness pressing against his chest. In the guest room, Krista lay awake thinking about the man who had risked his life for a stranger, who loved his children with such fierce devotion, who had listened to her story without judgment. She thought about Gabriel and Raphael, and how holding them tonight had been the first time since losing Sophia that her arms didn't feel empty. Neither knew they were both staring at the same ceiling, both wondering if perhaps, in the midst of their deepest sorrow, they had found something unexpected. Not a cure for their grief, but someone who understood its weight and might be willing to help carry it. Chapter 3. Learning to Trust Again. 3 weeks had passed since that first night, and Craig found himself checking his watch with increasing frequency as each workday wound down, counting minutes until he could drive home to warmth and laughter. Krista had helped Lily reconnect with her estranged sister in Portland, personally driving the young woman to the airport and ensuring she had both safe place to heal and financial resources to rebuild. But even after Lily's departure, Krista had continued coming to the house each afternoon, initially checking Craig's healing ankle, then helping with the boys' after-school routine, and finally because none of them could imagine their days without her presence. Now, as Craig pulled into his driveway at 5:43 p.m., he could see warm, golden glow of lights in his kitchen windows and hear melodic sound of laughter drifting from the backyard. His heart performed something suspiciously like a somersault, a sensation he hadn't experienced since teenage years with Elena. For the first time in 29 days, coming home felt like coming home instead of returning to the scene of his greatest loss. He found Gabriel and Raphael in the backyard with Krista, all three covered in dirt and grinning like conspirators. They'd been working on a small garden in the corner of the yard, and today had been planting day. Daddy, look! Gabriel scrambled to his feet, small hands black with soil. We planted flowers for Mama. Krista said they'll grow into something beautiful. Craig's throat tightened as he took in neat rows of seedlings and the small decorative stone they'd placed at center with Elena's garden painted in Raphael's careful 4-year-old lettering. It's perfect, buddy, Craig managed, kneeling to examine their work. He looked up at Krista, who was wiping her hands on an old towel, cheeks flushed from afternoon sun. This was your idea. The boys mentioned wanting to do something special for their mama, Krista said softly. I thought a memorial garden might be nice. Somewhere they could come and talk to her or just remember. The thoughtfulness of it, the way she'd honored Elena's memory instead of trying to erase it, hit Craig powerfully. Most people either avoided mentioning Elena entirely or spoke about her with such pitying sadness that it made the boys uncomfortable. But Krista had found a way to celebrate Elena's life while creating something new and beautiful. Can we show her the seeds we planted? Raphael asked, tugging on Craig's work shirt. For the next half hour, Craig listened as his sons excitedly described every plant they'd chosen and why. Sunflowers because Mama had loved them. Roses because they smelled pretty. Herbs because Mama had liked to cook. Watching them talk about their mother without tears, seeing them find joy in honoring her memory, Craig felt something shift inside his chest. Bath time, guys, Krista announced as the sun began to set. You're both absolutely filthy. Will you read us a story after? Gabriel asked hopefully. If your dad doesn't mind. Krista looked to Craig for permission and he nodded, not trusting his voice. As Krista herded the boys inside, Craig remained in the garden, studying the small plants that would grow into something beautiful. Elena would have loved this, he realized. She would have loved Krista's gentle way with the boys, her instinct to create rather than simply endure. By the time he made it inside, he could hear splashing and giggling from the upstairs bathroom. Craig stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening to Krista's patient voice as she helped the boys wash their hair, answering their endless questions about everything from why soap made bubbles to whether worms had feelings. Daddy, Raphael called down the stairs. Come see. Krista made my hair into a mohawk. Craig climbed the stairs to find both boys sporting elaborate soap mohawks, giggling as Krista pretended to be impressed by their fierce looks. The bathroom was completely soaked, towels everywhere, and Krista's shirt was damp from enthusiastic splashing. She looked absolutely beautiful. Sorry about the mess, she said, catching his expression. They got a little enthusiastic. Don't apologize, Craig said, leaning against the doorframe. I haven't heard them laugh like this since. He didn't finish the sentence, but Krista understood. After the boys were clean, dry, and in their pajamas, they all settled into the living room for story time. Gabriel claimed Krista's lap while Raphael curled up against Craig's side, and Krista read them a story about brave little bears who went on adventures. Her voice was warm and animated, bringing each character to life in a way that held both boys completely captivated. One more, Gabriel pleaded when she finished. One more, Krista agreed, reaching for another book. But instead of reading, she set it aside and smiled. How about I tell you a story instead? About two little boys who were so brave and so kind that they could make flowers grow just by believing in them. Craig watched, mesmerized, as Krista wove an impromptu tale about Gabriel and Raphael's magical garden powers, incorporating their actual day into a fantastical adventure. The boys hung on every word, their eyes wide with wonder. When Raphael's eyelids began to droop, Krista's voice grew softer, gentler, until both boys were fighting sleep. Will you help us with the garden tomorrow? Raphael mumbled sleepily. If your daddy says it's okay, Krista replied, stroking his hair. Please, Daddy, Gabriel added, though his eyes were already closed. We'll see, Craig said, but he was already planning to leave work early. After carrying the boys to their beds and tucking them in, Craig returned downstairs to find Krista cleaning up the living room. "You don't have to do that," Craig said, the same words he'd spoken every evening for 3 weeks. "I know," Krista replied with a small smile, "but I want to." They moved to the kitchen, falling into their established routine of making coffee and talking while the house settled into evening quiet. It had become Craig's favorite part of the day, these conversations that ranged from light and easy to deep and meaningful, always leaving him feeling less alone in the world. "Thank you," Craig said as they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, "for the garden, for the way you are with them. They're healing because of you." "They're healing because they're loved," Krista corrected. "You're a wonderful father, Craig. Don't doubt that." "Some days I feel like I'm drowning," he admitted, "like I'm failing them every day." "Do you know what Gabriel told me today while we were planting?" Krista asked. "He said you cry sometimes at night, but you try to be quiet so you don't make them sad. And Raphael said you always make sure they eat breakfast, even when you forget to eat yourself." She reached across the table and touched his hand. "They see how much you love them, even when you're struggling." Craig stared down at their joined hands, surprised by how natural the contact felt. "You're good with them. Better than I am some days?" "Different," Krista said. "Not better. You're their father, their security, their world. I'm just someone who cares about them. About all of you." The weight of those last words hung in the air between them. Craig looked up to find Krista watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, soft, tender, but also uncertain. "Krista," he began, not sure what he wanted to say. "I should probably go," she said quickly, pulling her hand back and standing. "It's getting late." But Craig stood too, and suddenly they were facing each other in the small space between the table and the counter, close enough that he could smell her perfume, see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Don't go yet," he said softly. "Craig ... Krista's voice was whisper quiet. "I know it's complicated. I know we're both still figuring out how to live with what we've lost, but I need you to know that these past 3 weeks, you've brought something back to this house that I thought was gone forever." "What?" she asked, though her eyes already held the answer. "Hope," Craig said simply. "Joy. The feeling that tomorrow might be better than today." They stood there for a long moment, the air between them charged with possibility and fear in equal measure. When Craig reached up to brush a strand of hair from Krista's face, she didn't pull away. When she leaned slightly into his touch, he felt his heart race. "I'm scared," Krista whispered. "Me too," Craig admitted, "but I'm more scared of pretending I don't feel this." They moved toward each other slowly, as if they were afraid sudden movement might break the spell. When Craig's lips finally brushed against Krista's, it was gentle, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she kissed him back with a tenderness that spoke of hope and healing, of two broken hearts recognizing their match in each other. It was soft and sweet and filled with the promise of something beautiful growing from the ashes of their pain. When they finally separated, both breathing unsteadily, Krista rested her forehead against Craig's chest. "This is happening fast," she murmured. "Does that scare you?" Craig asked, his arms coming up to hold her gently. "Yes," Krista said honestly, "but losing everything I thought mattered taught me something. Life is fragile and unpredictable, and when something good appears, maybe we shouldn't waste time questioning it." Craig pulled back to look at her face. "Are you saying I'm something good?" Krista's smile was radiant. "You and Gabriel and Raphael are the best things that have happened to me in a very long time. Maybe ever." "Stay tonight," Craig said impulsively. "Not in the guest room. With me." Krista studied his face carefully. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Craig replied. I want to fall asleep knowing you're here and wake up knowing you didn't disappear." "Okay," Krista whispered, and Craig felt his heart soar. Later, lying in bed with Krista curled against his side, Craig stared at the ceiling and marveled at how much his life had changed in just 3 weeks. The grief was still there. He suspected it always would be, but it no longer felt like it was crushing him. Instead, it had become part of the foundation on which something new and beautiful was being built. Beside him, Krista stirred in her sleep, her hand moving to rest over his heart. In the darkness, Craig smiled and pulled her closer, finally understanding that love didn't always announce itself with fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes it crept in quietly, disguised as friendship and comfort, until one day you realized it had become as essential as breathing. Tomorrow, he decided, he would leave work early and help his sons tend their mother's garden, and maybe, if he was brave enough, he would tell Krista that he was falling in love with her. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, for the first time in 29 days, Craig fell asleep looking forward to tomorrow. Chapter 4. The Ex-Husband's Shadow. 4 weeks later, Craig's life had settled into a rhythm that felt almost too good to be true. Krista had gradually moved more belongings into his house, nursing textbooks on the kitchen counter, lavender shampoo in the shower, her favorite coffee mug claiming permanent residence beside his, and Gabriel and Raphael had started calling her Mama Krista with such natural ease that it made Craig's heart swell every time. The memorial garden was thriving under her patient care, and the boys had developed a morning ritual of sitting beside Elena's headstone, telling their mother about dreams and plans in voices no longer carrying inconsolable grief. Craig was in his office at Jansen Construction Headquarters, reviewing blueprints for their next major project, a community center that would keep his crew busy through winter, when his secretary knocked with an expression that immediately put him on alert. "There's a man here to see you, Mr. Jansen," Janet said, her usually cheerful demeanor replaced by obvious discomfort. "Says he's Krista's husband, though I thought she was divorced." Craig's blood turned to ice water. "Ex-husband," he corrected firmly, rising from his desk with deliberate calm. "What does he want?" "Wouldn't say, just demanded to see you immediately." Janet lowered her voice. "He's not very pleasant, sir, and he looks expensive." Craig straightened his shoulders and walked into the reception area, where a tall, impeccably dressed man in an expensive suit was examining the company awards with obvious disdain. When he turned around, Craig was struck by how different he looked from what he'd expected. Damon was conventionally handsome in a polished corporate way, but his eyes were cold and calculating, like a shark's. "Craig Jansen, I presume," Damon said, extending a hand that Craig ignored. "I'm Damon Rutherford. We need to talk." "About what?" Craig kept his voice level, though every instinct screamed danger. "About my wife and the little game she's been playing with you and your children." Damon's smile was sharp, predatory. "Shall we discuss this privately? Or would you prefer your employees hear about how you've been harboring a mentally unstable woman?" Craig clenched his fists but gestured toward his office. Once the door was closed, Damon made himself comfortable in Craig's chair, a deliberate power play that made Craig's jaw tighten. "Krista isn't your wife anymore," Craig said, remaining standing. "And she's not mentally unstable." "Oh, but she is still legally my wife," Damon corrected, pulling out his phone to show Craig a photo. "The divorce won't be final for another month. And as for unstable, well, losing a baby can do terrible things to a woman's mind. Has she told you about the breakdown? The medication? The doctors who said she was a danger to herself?" Craig felt his stomach drop but kept his expression neutral. "I don't believe you." "Smart man would verify these things before letting a stranger around his children," Damon continued conversationally. "But then again, maybe you're just desperate and lonely enough to accept any woman who shows your boys a little attention." Get out, Craig said quietly, his voice deadly calm. I'm not here to cause trouble. Damon held up his hands in mock surrender. In fact, I'm here to solve your problem. You see, Krista inherited a considerable sum from her grandmother last week, close to $2 million. Suddenly, her little mental health crisis seems much more manageable. The pieces clicked into place for Craig with sickening clarity. You want her back for the money. I want my wife back because I love her, Damon said with practiced sincerity that didn't reach his eyes. The money is just a bonus, and I'm prepared to be very generous with you for taking care of her during her difficult period. She's not going anywhere with you, Craig said firmly. Damon's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cruel underneath. I think you underestimate my influence in this town. You see, my company has connections with several major developers who might be very interested to know that Jansen Construction has been unreliable lately, missing deadlines, subpar work quality. Word travels fast in this business. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a choice. Damon stood up, straightening his tie. Send Krista home where she belongs and continue building your little business. Keep interfering in my marriage and watch everything you've worked for disappear. I have friends in city planning, environmental oversight, the contractor licensing board. Shall I continue? Craig stepped closer, using his height and build to his advantage. Let me make something clear. Krista is under my protection now. She's part of my family. And if you come near her or my boys again, you'll discover that I'm not as civilized as you think I am. Damon laughed, but there was nervousness underneath it. Touching. But you can't protect her forever. And when this little fantasy crumbles, she'll have nowhere else to go but home to me. After Damon left, Craig sat in his office for a long time, hands shaking with barely contained rage. The threats against his business were serious. In a town this size, Damon probably did have the connections to cause real damage. But more disturbing were the implications about Krista's mental health. Could there be truth to any of it? Craig left work early, his mind churning as he drove home. He found Krista in the kitchen helping Gabrielle and Raphael make cookies, flour dusting her hair and genuine laughter on her lips. Looking at her now, seeing how happy and stable she seemed, he couldn't reconcile this woman with Damon's description. You're home early, Krista smiled, wiping her hands on a towel before coming to kiss him hello. Perfect timing. We're just about to put the first batch in the oven. Daddy, look! Raphael held up a misshapen cookie. Mine looks like a dinosaur. It's perfect, buddy, Craig said, though his attention was on Krista's face, searching for signs of the distress Damon had described. That evening, after the boys were in bed and they were cleaning up the kitchen together, Craig finally found the courage to broach the subject. Krista, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She looked up from loading the dishwasher, immediately alert to the serious tone in his voice. What is it? Damon came to see me today. The plate in Krista's hand slipped, shattering against the kitchen floor. Her face went white, and Craig saw real fear flash in her eyes. What did he want? She whispered. Craig knelt to help her clean up the broken pieces, noting how her hands shook. He wants you back. He mentioned your grandmother's inheritance. Of course he did. Krista's voice was bitter. $2 million is enough to make him forget how much he claimed to hate me. He also said some things about your mental health, about medication and doctors and... Craig hesitated, hating himself for even repeating it. About you being dangerous. Krista stood abruptly, walking to the window to stare out at the darkened backyard. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. After I lost Sophia, I went through a very dark period. I wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, could barely function. Damon had me committed to a psychiatric facility. She turned to face Craig, tears streaming down her cheeks. Not because he was worried about me, but because I was embarrassing him at his work functions. Being depressed was bad for his image. Krista. I was there for 6 weeks. They did put me on medication for depression and anxiety. And yes, at one point, I was considered a risk for self-harm because I couldn't see any reason to keep living. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But I got better. I learned to cope. And the day I was released, Damon handed me divorce papers. Craig crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, feeling her body shake with suppressed sobs. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid you'd look at me the way you're looking at me right now, she whispered against his chest. Like I'm broken. Like I might hurt your boys. That's not how I'm looking at you, Craig said firmly, pulling back to cup her face in his hands. I'm looking at you like someone who survived something horrible and came out stronger. I'm looking at you like the woman who saved my sons from drowning in their grief. But what if he's right? What if I am unstable? What if— Stop, Craig cut her off. I've watched you with Gabriel and Raphael for weeks. You're patient, loving, intuitive about what they need. You've brought more stability to this house than it's had since Elena died. He threatened you, didn't he? Krista asked, recognizing something in Craig's expression. Your business. Craig nodded grimly. He has connections. Says he can make my life very difficult if I don't send you back to him. Then maybe I should go, Krista said quietly. I won't let him destroy your livelihood because of me. Like hell, Craig's voice was fierce. I told him you're under my protection now, and I meant it. Let him try to come after me. I've dealt with worse than some entitled corporate shark. Before Krista could respond, they heard the front door slam open with such force that it rattled the windows. Heavy footsteps stomped through the house, and Damon's voice called out with false cheerfulness. Honey, I'm home. Craig and Krista rushed to the living room to find Damon standing there, clearly drunk, his expensive suit wrinkled and his hair disheveled. Behind him stood 2 large men who were obviously not social visitors. Damon, get out, Krista said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the fear in her eyes. You have no right to be here. I have every right, Damon slurred. You're still my wife, and it's time to come home. We have some talking to do about that inheritance. She's not going anywhere with you, Craig stepped in front of Krista protectively. Oh, the boyfriend wants to play hero, Damon laughed nastily. Boys, why don't you help Mr. Jansen understand the situation? The 2 men moved forward, but Craig had spent his entire adult life doing physical labor. When the first man grabbed his arm, Craig's fist connected with his solar plexus, dropping him to his knees. The second man hesitated just long enough for Craig to land an uppercut that sent him staggering backward. Daddy? Gabriel's small voice came from the top of the stairs, and everyone froze. Both boys stood there in their pajamas, eyes wide with terror at the chaos in their living room. Raphael was crying, and Gabriel clutched his brother's hand tightly. It's okay, boys, Krista said immediately, starting toward the stairs, but Damon grabbed her wrist, yanking her back so hard she cried out. You're coming with me, and we're going to sort this mess out once and for all, Damon snarled. The sound of Krista's pain and the sight of his boy's terror sent Craig into a rage he'd never experienced before. He grabbed Damon by the throat and slammed him against the wall with enough force to rattle the picture frames. Take your hands off her, Craig's voice was deadly quiet. Now. You can't protect her forever, Damon gasped, but he released Krista's wrist. Watch me, Craig said, then looked at the 2 hired muscle who were struggling to their feet. Get him out of my house, and if any of you come back, I'll do more than just bruise your ribs. As the men dragged a still protesting Damon toward the door, he called back over his shoulder. This isn't over, Krista. You belong to me, and I always get what's mine. After they left, Craig immediately went to comfort the terrified boys, while Krista locked the door and checked all the windows. When Gabriel and Raphael were finally calm enough to go back to bed, Craig and Krista sat on the living room couch, both shaking from adrenaline and emotion. "I'm so sorry," Krista whispered. "He could have hurt you, or the boys could have been—" "Hey," Craig interrupted, pulling her close. "None of this is your fault. He's the one who chose to break into my house and threaten my family." "Your family," Krista repeated softly. "Yes," Craig said firmly. "You're part of this family now, which means we protect each other. All of us." Krista looked up at him with eyes full of love and gratitude. "I love you, Craig. I love all of you so much." "I love you too," Craig replied, kissing her tenderly. "And tomorrow, we're going to figure out how to make sure Damon can never hurt you again." As they held each other in the aftermath of the confrontation, both knew that the easy, healing weeks they'd shared were over. Damon had made his intentions clear, and the fight for their newfound happiness was just beginning. But Craig had meant what he said. Krista was his family now, and he would protect his family with everything he had. Chapter 5. Fighting for Love. The next morning, Craig woke before dawn with purpose burning in his chest like white-hot steel. Beside him, Krista slept fitfully, her face still bearing traces of fear from the night before, small frown lines creasing her forehead even in sleep. He watched her for a moment, this beautiful, strong woman who had brought his family back from despair's brink, and felt his resolve crystallize into something unbreakable. Damon Rutherford had made the most critical mistake of his privileged life. He'd threatened Craig's family, terrorized innocent children, and put his hands on the woman Craig loved. Now, Craig was going to show him exactly what happened to people who made those kinds of errors. After ensuring Gabrielle and Raphael were still sleeping peacefully, both boys had climbed into bed with them around midnight, needing security after yesterday's trauma. Craig quietly dressed in his most professional work clothes and left for downtown. He'd spent sleepless hours researching Damon's business address, memorizing the Rutherford Financial Services building layout, and planning his approach with methodical precision. The building's security was minimal at 6 a.m., and Craig's work clothes and confident stride got him past the sleepy guard without question. He took the elevator to the 15th floor and found Damon's corner office, where the man himself was already at his desk, probably planning his next move against Krista. Craig didn't bother knocking. He walked straight into the office and closed the door behind him with a quiet click that made Damon's head snap up from his computer. "Security!" Damon reached for his phone, but Craig was faster, slamming his hand down on the receiver. "They can't hear you," Craig said calmly. "And even if they could, do you really want them to know why I'm here?" Damon leaned back in his expensive leather chair, trying to project confidence despite obvious fear in his eyes. "If you think you can intimidate me—" "I'm not here to intimidate you," Craig interrupted, settling into the chair across from Damon's desk with deliberate calm. "I'm here to explain the new rules." "Rules?" "You're going to stay away from Krista. You're going to stop threatening my business, and you're going to sign whatever papers need to be signed to make that divorce final immediately." Craig's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "In return, I won't destroy you." Damon laughed nervously. "You? Destroy me? I hate to break it to you, but I have resources you can't even imagine. Connections that—" "Reach into city planning and environmental oversight," Craig finished. "Yes, you mentioned that yesterday. But here's what you don't know about me, Damon. I've been in construction for 15 years. I know where every body is buried in this town, literally and figuratively." Craig pulled out his phone and showed Damon a series of photographs. "That's your company's latest residential development, the one where you cut corners on foundation work to save money. And that's the environmental impact report you falsified to get approval for the shopping center project. And this," Craig scrolled to another image, is documentation of the bribes you paid to get the city contract for the new municipal building. The color drained from Damon's face as he stared at the evidence. How did you? I have friends too, Craig said simply. The difference is mine actually care about right and wrong. They don't appreciate men who abandon their wives during medical emergencies or who threaten people's children. You can't prove any of that, Damon blustered, but his hands were shaking. Actually, I can. My friend Tommy works for the state inspector's office. He's been building a case against your company for months. All I have to do is give him the green light, and you'll be facing criminal charges for fraud, bribery, and endangering public safety. Craig leaned forward. Your clients will flee, your investors will disappear, and you'll be lucky if you avoid prison time. Damon stared at him for a long moment. Then his expression shifted to something uglier. You think you've won. You think this is over. I think you're going to be smart and walk away, Craig replied, because the alternative is losing everything you've worked for. Your choice. Krista will never be truly happy with you, Damon said, his voice vicious. She's broken, damaged goods. And when she has another breakdown, when she becomes more trouble than she's worth, you'll understand why I left her. Craig stood up slowly, his restraint finally snapping. In one swift motion, he grabbed Damon by his expensive tie and hauled him halfway across the desk. Listen to me very carefully. Craig's voice was deadly quiet. If I ever hear you call her damaged again, if you so much as speak her name in public, I will personally make sure your life becomes a living hell. Are we clear? Damon nodded frantically, and Craig released him, straightening his own shirt as if nothing had happened. The divorce papers will be signed by the end of the week, Craig said, walking toward the door. And Damon, if you ever come near my family again, I'll do worse than ruin your business. I'll ruin you. Craig left the building feeling lighter than he had in weeks. He stopped by his office to make some phone calls, setting certain protective measures in motion, then headed home to find Krista making breakfast for Gabriel and Raphael. You left early, she said, studying his face with concern. Where did you go? Had some business to take care of, Craig replied, kissing her cheek and ruffling the boy's hair. How are my guys this morning? We made pancakes, Gabriel announced proudly. Mama Krista let us help flip them. The casual way Gabriel called her Mama made Craig's heart swell. It had been happening more frequently, and each time Krista's face lit up with beautiful joy. They're delicious, Craig said, taking a bite of the perfectly golden pancakes. Best chefs in the city right here. After breakfast, while the boys played in the backyard, Craig told Krista about his confrontation with Damon. He watched her face carefully, expecting fear or worry, but instead saw something that looked like fierce pride. You went after him, she said softly. For me. For us, Craig corrected. For our family. Krista stood and began pacing the kitchen, her mind clearly working. He won't give up easily. Damon doesn't like to lose, and he certainly doesn't like to be outsmarted. What are you thinking? Krista turned to face him, and Craig saw new determination in her eyes. I'm thinking it's time I stopped being afraid and started fighting back. Really fighting back. What do you mean? I mean, Damon made one crucial mistake when he abandoned me at the hospital, Krista said, her voice growing stronger. He assumed I was too weak, too broken to ever be a threat to him. But losing everything taught me something important. When you have nothing left to lose, you become very dangerous. Over the next several days, Craig watched in amazement as Krista transformed from a woman haunted by her past into a strategic force of nature. She spent hours on her laptop, making phone calls, gathering information. She was methodical, thorough, and absolutely relentless. I've been tracking Damon's business practices for years, she explained one evening as they sat in Craig's home office, surrounded by printouts and legal documents. At first, it was just hurt and anger, but now I realize I've been building a case without even knowing it. What kind of case? Fraud, tax evasion, bribery, environmental violations. Damon's company is built on a foundation of illegal shortcuts and ethical lapses. Krista's fingers flew across the keyboard. And I have evidence of all of it. How? Krista's smile was sharp. Because for 5 years I was the dutiful corporate wife who attended every function, who smiled and made small talk while the men discussed business. They never thought I was listening, never imagined I was remembering every detail. Craig pulled his chair closer to see what she was working on. The scope of her documentation was staggering. Financial records, recorded conversations, photographs, email correspondences. It was the kind of comprehensive evidence that could destroy a man's entire empire. "This is incredible," Craig breathed. "How long have you been collecting all this?" "Since the first time he cheated on me," Krista replied matter-of-factly. "I knew eventually I'd need leverage. I just never thought I'd have the courage to use it." That weekend, while Craig worked in the memorial garden with Gabrielle and Raphael, he watched Krista through the kitchen window as she continued her methodical destruction of her ex-husband's life. There was something beautiful about her focused intensity, her absolute determination to protect their family. "Daddy, look!" Raphael called out, pointing to a small green shoot emerging from the soil. "The sunflowers are growing." "Just like Mama said they would," Gabrielle added solemnly. "She said beautiful things can grow even after sad things happen." Craig knelt beside his sons, studying the tiny plant that represented so much hope. "She was right, wasn't she?" "Yeah," Raphael nodded. "Just like how Mama Krista came to help us feel better after Mama went to heaven." The simple wisdom of his 4-year-old son hit Craig powerfully. This was exactly what Elena would have wanted, for their boys to be loved, to be happy, to know that life could be beautiful again, even after loss. That evening, after the boys were in bed, Craig found Krista on the back porch, staring at the stars. He sat beside her on the porch swing, pulling her close. "Penny, for your thoughts." "I was thinking about the first night I came here," Krista said softly. "How broken we all were. How impossible it seemed that we could ever be happy again. And now I look at Gabriel and Raphael, and I see boys who laugh every day. I see a man who's learned to love again despite his grief. And I see myself fighting for something beautiful instead of just surviving." She turned to look at him. "We're not the same people we were 6 weeks ago." "No, we're not," Craig agreed. "We're stronger. We're a family." "A family worth fighting for," Krista added, and Craig heard the steel beneath her gentle words. "Damon has no idea what he's up against, does he?" Krista's smile was radiant and dangerous in equal measure. Not even close. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, Craig felt deep satisfaction. Tomorrow, Krista would begin systematically dismantling Damon's empire. But tonight they were simply a family who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate tragedies and built something unbreakably strong. Inside the house, Gabriel and Raphael slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and protected. In the backyard, Elena's memorial garden grew steadily toward the light, a testament to the truth that beautiful things could indeed bloom from the deepest sorrow. And on the porch swing, 2 people who had thought love was lost to them forever planned their future with the quiet confidence of those who had already survived the worst life could offer, and discovered they were stronger than they'd ever imagined. Chapter 6: Becoming a Family. 3 months had passed since Damon's violent intrusion, and the Janssen household had settled into a rhythm that felt both natural and precious. Krista had officially moved in during November, her belongings finding rightful places alongside Craig's and the boys' possessions as if they'd always belonged there. What had started as a temporary arrangement born of crisis had evolved into something that felt like destiny. Craig stood in the doorway of Gabrielle and Raphael's bedroom, watching Krista read their bedtime story with the same sense of wonder that struck him every evening. Tonight it was the Velveteen Rabbit, and her voice was soft and melodic as she brought the tale of love making things real to life. Gabriel was curled against her left side, while Raphael had claimed her lap, both boys treating her presence as naturally as gravity. "Does being loved really make you real?" Raphael asked when she finished, his small hand playing with Krista's shirt hem. "I think so," Krista replied thoughtfully. "When someone loves you completely, you become the best version of yourself. You become real in a way you never were before. Like how Daddy became happier when you came to live with us," Gabriel observed with 4-year-old directness. Craig felt his throat tighten at his son's words. The boy wasn't wrong. Craig had become more himself since Krista entered their lives, more present, more hopeful, more alive. "Like that," Krista agreed, kissing Gabriel's head. "And like how you boys made me feel like I could be a mama again, even after I thought that dream was over forever." "You're the best mama," Raphael declared sleepily, "even better than the mamas in the stories." Craig watched Krista's eyes fill with tears at those simple words. He knew how much it meant to her to be trusted with the boy's love, to be given the chance to be the mother her own lost daughter would never allow her to be. After tucking the boys in, Craig and Krista made their way to the living room. It was their favorite time, the house quiet, the boys settled, and the evening stretching out before them like a gift. "I have something for you," Craig said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Krista's eyes widened. "Craig, ... It's not what you think," he said quickly, sitting beside her. "Well, it is, but it's also more than that." He opened the box to reveal a stunning vintage engagement ring, a princess-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones in delicate white gold. But nestled beside it was a smaller ring, clearly designed for a child. "The big one is for you, if you'll have it," Craig said, his voice soft with emotion. "But this little one is from Gabriel and Raphael. They helped me pick it out, and they wanted to give you something that showed you're their mama now, officially." Krista's hands trembled as she looked at the rings. "Craig, I know we haven't known each other long," Craig continued. "I know this is fast and complicated, and maybe not what either of us planned. But I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. I know that you've brought light back into this house, that you've given my boys a mother who loves them completely, and that you've made me remember what it feels like to be truly happy." He got down on one knee in front of the couch, taking her hands in his. "Krista Hagman, will you marry me? Will you officially become part of this family that already can't imagine life without you?" Tears streamed down Krista's face as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." Craig slipped the engagement ring onto her finger, marveling at how perfectly it fit. Then he placed the smaller ring on her right hand. "This one is from the boys," he explained. "They said they wanted you to have something that reminded you that you're their mama forever, no matter what." Before Krista could respond, they heard small footsteps on the stairs. Gabrielle and Raphael appeared in their pajamas, grinning with excitement that suggested they'd been listening. "Did she say yes?" Gabriel asked, bouncing on his toes. "I said yes," Krista confirmed, holding out her hands to show both rings. The boys launched themselves at her, and Craig found himself in the middle of a group hug that felt like the culmination of everything they'd built together. "We have something else for you," Raphael announced, running to retrieve a carefully wrapped package. Inside was a handmade photo album filled with pictures from the past 2 months. The boys had clearly worked on it with help. Their careful writing labeled each photo with captions like "Mama Krista teaching us to cook" and our new family in the garden, and the day Mama Krista made Daddy smile again. The last page contained a drawing that Gabriel and Raphael had made together. It showed 4 stick figures standing in front of a house, with a garden full of flowers and a rainbow overhead. At the bottom, in Raphael's careful letters, it said, "Our forever family." "It's perfect," Krista said, her voice thick with emotion. "Everything about this is perfect." They spent the next hour planning their wedding, small and simple, they decided, held in the backyard with Eleanor's memorial garden as the backdrop. They would honor Craig's first marriage while celebrating the new beginning they'd found together. The next morning brought an unexpected challenge. Craig was reviewing contracts in his home office when Krista knocked, her laptop in her arms and a grim expression on her face. "We have a problem," she said, setting the computer on his desk. "Damon's making his most desperate move yet." On the screen was a legal document, a petition for emergency custody of Gabriel and Raphael, filed by Damon Rutherford on behalf of his mentally unstable wife, who has inappropriately attached herself to minor children in a misguided attempt to replace her deceased child. Craig felt the blood drain from his face as he read the accusations. According to Damon's filing, Krista was an unfit influence due to her documented history of psychiatric hospitalization and her obsessive behavior toward children not her own. The petition requested immediate removal of the children from Craig's home for their own safety. "He can't do this," Craig said, his voice tight with fury. "He has no legal standing to petition for custody of my sons." "Actually, he does," Krista said quietly. "As my legal husband, the divorce isn't final yet. He can claim he's acting in my best interests and the children's welfare. It's a long shot. But if he can convince a judge that I'm unstable and that you're enabling dangerous behavior—" Craig stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, Gabriel and Raphael were playing on their swing set, their laughter carrying through the glass. The thought of them being taken away made him feel physically sick. "What do we do?" he asked. "We fight," Krista said simply. "But first we need to get ahead of this." She pulled out her phone. "Janet, it's Krista. I need you to expedite the divorce filing we discussed. Yes, I know it's Saturday. This is an emergency." As Krista made her calls, Craig found himself thinking about the life they'd built together. In just 2 months, she'd become not just his partner, but the heart of their home. She was the one who remembered that Raphael preferred his sandwiches cut diagonally, who knew that Gabriel needed an extra story on nights when he missed his mother. "The emergency hearing is Monday morning," Krista announced. "My lawyer thinks we have a good chance of getting the petition dismissed, especially if we can demonstrate that I'm not a threat to the boys' welfare." "You're not a threat," Craig said fiercely. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to them. To all of us. I know that, and you know that, but we need to prove it to a judge who doesn't know our story." Krista sat down, her expression determined. "Which means it's time to accelerate my plans for Damon." That afternoon, while the boys napped, Krista made a series of phone calls that Craig could only hear pieces of. He caught fragments, discussions of financial records, meetings with attorneys, references to evidence that would bury him completely. "I've been building this case for months," she explained when she finally hung up. "But I was going to take my time, be methodical, make sure every detail was perfect. Now we don't have that luxury." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to remind Damon why he should never have underestimated me." Krista's smile was sharp and beautiful. "By Monday morning, he's going to have much bigger problems than trying to take our boys away." That evening, as they sat down to dinner as a family, Craig looked around the table at the faces he loved most in the world. Gabriel was carefully arranging his vegetables into patterns, a habit that always made Krista smile. Raphael was telling them about the caterpillar he'd found in the garden, his eyes bright with discovery. "Tomorrow is going to be difficult," Craig said after the boys were in bed. "Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for this for a long time," Krista replied. "Damon thinks he can use my past against me, use my grief as a weapon to destroy what we've built. But he's forgotten something important." "What's that?" "Grief taught me how to survive losing everything. And people who've lost everything are the most dangerous people of all, because we know exactly how much we're willing to sacrifice to protect what we love." Craig pulled her close, feeling the strength in her slender frame. "I love you," he said simply. "Whatever happens, we face it together." "Together," Krista agreed, and Craig could hear the promise in her voice. Outside, a storm was gathering, dark clouds rolling in from the horizon. But inside their home, surrounded by the evidence of the life they'd built together, family photos, children's artwork, the engagement rings glinting on Krista's finger, Craig felt an unshakable certainty. They were a family now, bonded not just by love but by the trials they'd already weathered together. And whatever Damon threw at them next, they would face it the same way they'd faced everything else, as a team, protecting what mattered most. The fight for their family was just beginning, but Craig had never been more sure of anything in his life. They were going to win. Chapter 7. The Revenge Begins. Sunday morning arrived with deceptive calm. Craig woke to find Krista already gone from their bed, the sound of rapid typing echoing from his home office like machine gun fire. When he investigated with coffee in hand, he found her surrounded by a command center, multiple laptops displaying spreadsheets and legal documents, phones charging in a neat row, and stacks of manila folders organized with military precision. "How long have you been awake?" he asked, settling the coffee beside her elbow. "Since 3:17 a.m., Krista replied without looking up, her fingers flying across the keyboard with surgical precision. "Couldn't sleep, so I decided to put the insomnia to productive use." She gestured to the organized chaos surrounding her. "In 22 hours, Damon is going to wake up in a world where his name is synonymous with corruption, fraud, and federal investigation." Craig sat down in the chair beside her desk, studying the intensity in her face. This was a side of Krista he'd only glimpsed before. The strategic mind hidden beneath the gentle exterior, the steel that grief and betrayal had forged into something unbreakable. "Tell me what you're planning," he said. Krista finally looked at him, her brown eyes bright with dangerous satisfaction. "Do you remember when I told you I'd been collecting evidence against Damon for years? Well, I wasn't just gathering random information. I was building a comprehensive case against every illegal, unethical, and fraudulent thing he's ever done." She turned one of the laptops toward him, showing a spreadsheet containing hundreds of entries. Financial fraud, tax evasion, bribery, environmental violations, sexual harassment, illegal campaign contributions, money laundering. The list goes on, and I have documentation for all of it. Craig whistled low. "How did you manage to get all this?" 5 years of marriage to a man who thought I was too stupid to understand business," Krista said with bitter satisfaction. "He used to bring work home, leave his laptop open, take calls in front of me like I was furniture. I started taking pictures, recording conversations, copying files. At first, it was just self-preservation. I knew eventually I'd need leverage. But after he abandoned me at the hospital," her voice hardened, "it became about justice. And you're going to release all of this?" "Not release," Krista corrected. "Deploy. Strategically, systematically, and with maximum impact." She pointed to a timeline she'd created. "At 9 a.m., the financial records go to the IRS and the State Tax Commission. At 10 a.m., the environmental violations go to the EPA and local authorities. At 11 a.m., The evidence of bribery goes to the FBI's white-collar crime division. Craig felt a chill of anticipation. And then his business partners start getting anonymous packages containing proof of his illegal activities. His clients receive evidence that their projects were built with substandard materials. His investors learn that their money has been systematically embezzled. Krista's smile was sharp and beautiful. By noon tomorrow, Damon's entire empire will be under investigation by half a dozen different agencies. This isn't just revenge, this is total annihilation. Yes, it is, she said calmly, because he didn't just hurt me, Craig. His illegal construction practices have put people's lives at risk. His environmental violations have poisoned groundwater. His financial fraud has stolen money from pension funds and charities. He's a predator who's been hiding behind expensive suits and political connections, and it's time someone held him accountable. Craig reached over and took her hand, feeling the slight tremor that betrayed her emotions beneath the controlled exterior. Are you sure you're ready for this? Once you do this, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment he tried to take Gabriel and Raphael away from us, Krista replied fiercely. He wants to use the legal system to destroy our family? Fine, but he's about to learn that two can play that game, and I'm much better at it than he is. They were interrupted by small footsteps on the stairs, and moments later Gabriel and Raphael appeared in the doorway, still in their pajamas and looking concerned. "Mama Krista, why are you awake so early?" Raphael asked, climbing into her lap with the easy affection that still made Craig's heart swell. "I had some important work to finish, baby," Krista said, immediately shifting from strategic warrior to loving mother. "But I'm done now. Should we make pancakes for breakfast?" "With chocolate chips?" Gabriel asked hopefully. "Is there any other kind?" Krista laughed, closing her laptops and giving the boys her full attention. As they moved to the kitchen, Craig marveled at how seamlessly Krista could transition between these different aspects of herself. The woman who had just outlined a plan to destroy her ex-husband's life was now patiently helping two 4-year-olds measure flour and crack eggs. "Daddy, are you and Mama Krista really getting married?" Raphael asked as they sat down to breakfast. "We really are," Craig confirmed. "How do you feel about that?" "Happy," Gabriel said immediately. "Now she can't go away, right?" Craig felt his chest tighten at the underlying fear in his son's question. "That's right, buddy. Once we're married, Mama Krista will officially be part of our family, forever." "Good," Raphael nodded solemnly. "Because we need her." "Yes, we do," Craig agreed, catching Krista's eye across the table and seeing the love and determination there. After breakfast, while the boys played in the backyard, Craig and Krista returned to the office to finalize her plans. Craig watched in fascination as she made call after call, her voice professional and calm as she spoke with attorneys, government officials, and journalists. "The beauty of this approach," she explained between calls, "is that everything I'm doing is completely legal and ethical. I'm simply providing evidence of crimes to the appropriate authorities. Damon can't claim harassment or revenge. I'm just being a concerned citizen." "A concerned citizen with a very comprehensive filing system," Craig observed. "The best kind," Krista smiled. "And the timing is crucial. By the time he realizes what's happening, the wheels will already be in motion. Multiple investigations, media attention, business relationships collapsing. He'll be fighting fires on a dozen different fronts." At sunset, they took the boys to Elena's memorial garden. The sunflowers had grown tall and bright, their faces turned toward the dying light. Gabrielle and Raphael had developed a ritual of telling their mother about their day, and Craig listened as they excitedly shared news about the upcoming wedding. "And Mama Krista is going to wear a pretty dress," Gabriel told Elena's memorial stone. "And we get to carry the rings and throw flowers." She makes Daddy smile all the time now, Raphael added. I think you would like her, Mama. She takes really good care of us. Craig felt tears prick his eyes at his son's simple words. Elena would have liked Krista, he realized. She would have been grateful that someone was loving her boys with such devotion, that someone had brought joy back into their home. I think your first mama would be very happy that you have a second mama who loves you so much, Krista said gently, kneeling beside the boys in the garden. And I promise to take care of you the way she would have wanted. That night, after the boys were asleep, Craig and Krista sat on their back porch, holding hands and watching the stars. Tomorrow would bring the custody hearing and the beginning of Krista's systematic destruction of Damon's empire. But tonight they were simply two people who had found love in the aftermath of loss, preparing to fight for the family they'd built together. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Craig asked. About the hearing? A little, Krista admitted, but not about the rest of it. I've been planning this for too long to be nervous now. What if he tries to retaliate? With what? Krista's laugh was confident. By the time I'm done, he'll be lucky if he's not in federal prison. Besides, he made one critical mistake when he filed that custody petition. What's that? He gave me the perfect motivation to stop holding back. Krista turned to look at Craig, her face serious in the starlight. I could have taken my time, been subtle, let him destroy himself gradually. But the moment he threatened our boys, he escalated this into total war, and he has no idea how well armed I am. Craig lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles, tasting the engagement ring he'd placed there. I love you, he said simply. Your strength, your intelligence, your fierce protection of our family. I love all of it. I love you too, Krista replied, and tomorrow I'm going to prove exactly how much. As they sat together in the peaceful darkness, Craig felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Damon had expected to find a broken woman, easy to manipulate and intimidate. Instead, he'd walked into a trap that had been years in the making, set by someone who had learned to turn pain into power and grief into unshakable resolve. The revenge was about to begin, and Craig had no doubt about the outcome. Krista had spent too long planning, gathered too much evidence, and had too much to protect to fail now. By this time tomorrow, the man who had tried to destroy their family would discover what happened when you underestimated a woman with nothing left to lose and everything worth fighting for. In the memorial garden, the sunflowers stood tall and strong, their roots deep in soil that had been nourished by love and loss in equal measure. Just like the family that tended them, they had grown beautiful and unbreakable, ready to face whatever storms might come. Chapter 8. When the Past Explodes. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Craig woke at 5:30 a.m. to find Krista already dressed in a sharp charcoal gray business suit, her hair pulled back in a severe chignon that emphasized the determined set of her jaw. She was sitting at her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard, as she executed the final phases of her meticulously planned campaign. Phase 1 is complete, she announced without looking up, her voice carrying quiet satisfaction. The IRS received a comprehensive financial analysis 27 minutes ago. The EPA gets the environmental violations documentation in exactly 8 minutes. Craig watched her work, amazed by the calm precision with which she was orchestrating Damon's systematic destruction. Any second thoughts about unleashing this much devastation? None whatsoever, Krista replied, her voice steady as granite. He sealed his fate the moment he tried to take Gabriel and Raphael away from us. The custody hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m., but by 9:30, Krista's phone was ringing with calls from journalists who had received anonymous tips about Rutherford Financial Services. Craig listened to her deflect questions with professional skill. Mrs. Rutherford, can you confirm that your husband's company is under investigation for tax evasion? I wouldn't know, Krista replied smoothly. My husband and I are in the middle of divorce proceedings. I haven't been involved in his business activities for some time. When she hung up, Craig raised an eyebrow. Still legally Mrs. Rutherford for another few hours? Not for much longer, Krista smiled grimly. My lawyer expedited the divorce filing. It should be finalized this afternoon, assuming we get through the custody hearing first. They arrived at the courthouse to find Damon waiting with his attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit. Damon himself appeared confident, even smug, clearly expecting an easy victory over what he perceived as a mentally unstable woman and her enabling boyfriend. Krista, Damon approached them with false warmth. You look well. I hope you've had time to think about what's best for everyone involved. I have, Krista replied calmly. I've thought about it a great deal. Something in her tone made Damon's smile falter slightly, but before he could respond, his phone rang. Then his attorney's phone, then his phone again. Craig watched with grim satisfaction as both their expressions grew increasingly alarmed with each call. Your Honor, Damon's attorney began when they were called into the courtroom, my client is requesting a brief continuance to deal with an urgent business matter. Absolutely not, the judge, a stern woman in her 60s, cut her off. Mr. Rutherford filed this emergency petition claiming imminent danger to these children. If it was urgent enough to demand an immediate hearing, it's urgent enough to proceed. The hearing itself was a masterclass in legal destruction. Damon's attorney tried to paint Krista as an unstable woman, projecting her grief onto Craig's children. But Krista's lawyer was ready with testimonials from the boys' pediatrician, their preschool teachers, and even Mrs. Patterson, all attesting to the positive changes in Gabriel and Raphael since Krista became part of their lives. Furthermore, Your Honor, Krista's attorney continued, Mr. Rutherford has no legal standing to petition for custody of children who are not his biological or adoptive children, from a woman who is about to finalize divorce proceedings against him. This appears to be nothing more than a harassment tactic. As the hearing progressed, Damon's phone continued to buzz with increasing frequency. Craig could see sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to maintain composure while his empire crumbled in real time. The petition is dismissed, the judge declared after less than an hour. Mr. Rutherford, if you file any further frivolous claims regarding these children, I will hold you in contempt of court. Outside the courthouse, Damon finally exploded. What did you do? He grabbed Krista's arm as they walked down the steps. The FBI is at my office. The IRS has frozen my accounts, and I have reporters calling every 5 minutes asking about environmental violations. Let go of me, Krista said quietly, but her voice carried a warning that made Craig step closer. This is you, isn't it? Damon's grip tightened. You always were a vindictive bitch. You think you can destroy everything I've worked for. I think, Krista said, jerking her arm free, that you destroyed yourself the moment you decided illegal business practices were acceptable. I just provided the evidence to the appropriate authorities. You have no idea what you've done, Damon snarled. I have connections, resources. I can make your life— What life? Krista interrupted, her calm finally cracking to reveal the fury beneath. You already took my life when you let our daughter die because you couldn't be bothered to drive me to the hospital. You already destroyed everything when you walked away like she never mattered. What exactly do you think you can take from me now? Before Damon could respond, his phone rang again. This time, when he answered, his face went completely white. They what? He screamed into the phone. All of them. How is that possible? Craig watched with satisfaction as Damon's world continued to implode. Through the phone, they could hear his assistant explaining that his major clients had terminated contracts, business partners were calling emergency meetings, and media crews surrounded his office building. This isn't over, Damon said as he hung up, his voice shaking with rage. You think you've won, but I'll find a way to make you pay for this. Actually, Krista said, pulling out her own phone, it is over. I just received confirmation that our divorce is final. You have no legal connection to me or my family anymore. Your family? Damon laughed bitterly. You mean the widower and his damaged children that you're using to replace the baby you killed? The words hit like a physical blow, and Craig felt rage explode in his chest. But before he could move, Krista stepped forward, her voice deadly quiet. My daughter didn't die because of me. She died because of you. Because you were too selfish and cruel to take your wife to the hospital when she was begging for help. And now, everyone is going to know exactly what kind of man you really are. You crazy bitch! Damon started to lunge forward, but Craig was ready. In one swift motion, he grabbed Damon by the throat and slammed him against the courthouse wall. Touch her again, and I'll break every bone in your body, Craig said, his voice eerily calm despite the violence in his grip. Craig, Krista touched his arm gently. He's not worth it. Let him go. Reluctantly, Craig released Damon, who straightened his tie with shaking hands. This isn't over, Damon repeated, but his voice lacked conviction now. Yes, it is, Krista said with finality. Go home, Damon. Figure out how you're going to explain to federal investigators why you've been embezzling from your clients' pension funds. Try to come up with a story about why you've been bribing city officials for construction permits. Worry about whether you'll be able to afford a good defense attorney after the IRS seizes your assets. As Damon stumbled away, visibly shaken, Craig put his arm around Krista and pulled her close. Are you okay? I'm perfect, Krista said, and Craig could hear the relief in her voice. It's done. He can't hurt us anymore. They drove home in comfortable silence, both processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Craig's phone had been buzzing with calls from business associates who had heard about Damon's troubles and wanted to confirm that Jansen Construction had no ties to Rutherford Financial Services. Your business is going to benefit from this, Krista observed as Craig declined another call. Contractors are going to want to distance themselves from Damon, and you're the obvious alternative. They arrived home to find Gabriel and Raphael playing in the backyard with Mrs. Patterson, who had agreed to watch them during the hearing. The boys ran to them immediately, and Craig felt his heart swell as they both hugged Krista tightly. Did the mean man say we can't stay with you? Raphael asked, his small face worried. The judge said you get to stay with us forever, Krista assured him, kneeling down to his level. Nobody can ever take you away from your daddy and me. Good, Gabriel said decisively, because we love you. I love you too, baby, Krista replied, her voice thick with emotion. More than you'll ever know. That evening, as they sat down to dinner as a family, Craig's phone rang one final time. It was Damon's number, and against his better judgment, Craig answered. Craig. Damon's voice was broken, desperate. Please, I need to talk to Krista. My lawyers say if I can get her to recant some of the evidence. No, Craig said simply. Don't call here again. Please, you don't understand. They're talking about federal charges, prison time. I could lose everything. You should have thought of that before you tried to take our children away, Craig replied. And before you let your wife's baby die because you couldn't be bothered to help her. That was different. Craig hung up and turned off his phone. Across the table, Krista was helping Raphael cut his chicken, while Gabriel told them about the butterfly he'd seen in the garden. This was what mattered, this family, this love, this life they'd built together from the ashes of their separate tragedies. No more calls, Craig announced. From now on, it's just us. Just us, Krista agreed, and Craig could see the peace in her eyes. The war was over, and they had won more than just a victory. They had won their future. Outside, storm clouds were gathering again, but inside their home, Surrounded by the warmth of family and the certainty of love, Craig felt only gratitude. They had faced the worst that life could throw at them and emerged stronger, more united, and more determined than ever to protect what they'd built together. The past had finally exploded into nothing, leaving only the beautiful present and the bright promise of tomorrow. Chapter 9. Blood and Redemption. 4 days had passed since Damon's empire collapsed, and Craig had begun to believe the nightmare was finally over. Krista's systematic destruction had been so thorough that federal agents had arrested him on 17 separate fraud charges. His assets were frozen by 3 different agencies, and his company was facing not just bankruptcy, but criminal racketeering charges. The man who had once seemed so threatening now appeared to be exactly what he was, a coward who crumbled when faced with consequences. Craig was at the Riverside construction site, reviewing final plans for their most ambitious project yet, a 30-unit affordable housing complex, when his phone erupted with Mrs. Patterson's number. He answered with a smile, expecting to hear about some small adventure Gabriel and Raphael had gotten into. Instead, he heard pure panic. "Craig, oh dear God, Craig, I'm so sorry." Mrs. Patterson was sobbing so hard that her words came out in broken fragments. "I only went inside for maybe 3 minutes to get them their afternoon snacks, and when I came back to the yard, oh, sweet Jesus." "What happened?" Craig's blood turned to liquid nitrogen. "Where are my boys?" "Gabriel is here with me. He's safe, but Raphael..." Mrs. Patterson's voice shattered completely. "Someone took Raphael, Craig," Gabriel said. A man in a dark coat grabbed him and put him in a black car. "I've already called 911, but Craig, I'm so sorry." Craig was already running toward his truck, phone still pressed to his ear. "I'm coming home. Don't let Gabriel out of your sight." The drive home was a blur of panic and rage. Craig's hands shook as he called Krista, who was at her lawyer's office finalizing post-divorce paperwork. "Raphael's been taken," he said the moment she answered. The silence that followed was deafening. When Krista finally spoke, her voice was deadly calm. "Damon." "Has to be," Craig agreed, pulling into his driveway. "I'm home now. The police are here." Inside, Craig found Gabriel clinging to Mrs. Patterson, his small face streaked with tears. The sight of his terrified son broke Craig's heart, but he forced himself to stay calm as he knelt down to Gabriel's level. "Can you tell me what happened, buddy?" Craig asked gently. "A man came to the backyard," Gabriel whispered. "He said he was a friend of Mama Krista's, and he wanted to show us something cool in his car." Raphael went to look, and then the man grabbed him and drove away really fast. "Did you see what the man looked like?" Gabriel nodded, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "He looked like the mean man who came to our house before, the one who made you and Mama Krista sad." Craig felt rage explode in his chest, but before he could respond, Krista burst through the front door. She immediately went to Gabriel, pulling him into her arms while her eyes met Craig's over his head. "Tell me everything," she said to the police officer who was taking notes. "Based on the description and circumstances, we're treating this as a kidnapping," Officer Martinez explained. "We've issued an Amber Alert, and we're tracking down Mr. Rutherford's known associates and possible locations." "He's desperate," Krista said, her voice tight with fear and fury. "His life is over, his money is gone, and he's facing federal prison. He has nothing left to lose." Craig's phone rang and an unknown number flashed on the screen. When he answered, Damon's voice came through, slurred and manic. "I have something that belongs to you," Damon said without preamble. "Where is he?" Craig's voice was deadly quiet. "Where is my son?" "Safe for now, but that depends entirely on Krista's willingness to cooperate." "Put him on speaker," Krista demanded, moving closer to Craig. When she spoke, her voice was surprisingly calm. "What do you want, Damon?" "I want my life back," Damon replied, his voice cracking. You destroyed everything. My business, my reputation, my freedom. But you can fix it. How? You're going to recant your statements to the authorities. You're going to admit that you fabricated evidence because you were mentally unstable and seeking revenge. You're going to take full responsibility for everything that's happened to me. And if I do that, you'll let Raphael go, Krista asked. If you do that, and if you come with me to start over somewhere else, then yes, your little boyfriend can have his son back. The line went dead, and Craig immediately turned to Officer Martinez. Can you trace that call? We're trying, but he's probably using a burner phone, the location he mentioned. Do you know it? Craig nodded grimly. Warehouse 47 in the old industrial district, about 20 minutes from here. Used to be a textile factory, mostly empty now, lots of places to hide. We'll coordinate with SWAT and, Martinez began, but Krista was already moving toward the door. Where are you going? Craig caught her arm. To get Raphael back, Krista said simply. You're not going alone. It's obviously a trap. Of course it's a trap, Krista replied. But he has our son, Craig. What choice do we have? The next 20 minutes felt like hours as they coordinated with police and drove toward the warehouse district. Craig had insisted on coming with her despite the risk, and they'd worked out a plan with the tactical team to position themselves around the building before Krista went inside. I should be the one going in there, Craig said as they parked a block away from the warehouse. He wants you, not me. He wants me because he thinks I'm weak, Krista replied, checking the small recording device the police had given her. He still sees me as the broken woman he abandoned at the hospital, but that woman doesn't exist anymore. Krista, I love you, she interrupted, leaning over to kiss him fiercely. I love you and Gabriel and Raphael more than I thought it was possible to love anyone, and I'm going to get our boy back. Before Craig could stop her, she was out of the car and walking toward the warehouse. Craig watched through binoculars as she approached the building, every muscle in his body tensed with the need to follow her. Inside the warehouse, Craig could hear voices but couldn't make out words. The police radio crackled with updates from the tactical team, but everything seemed to be taking too long. Then, suddenly, Craig heard Raphael's voice crying for his daddy, and his restraint shattered. I'm going in, he told Martinez, already moving toward the building. Mr. Jansen, you need to wait for... But Craig was already running. He slipped through a side entrance he knew from his construction work, moving as quietly as possible through the maze of abandoned equipment. He found them in the main warehouse floor, Damon holding a gun on Krista, while Raphael sat tied to a chair nearby, tears streaming down his small face. The sight of his terrified son gave Craig a clarity he'd never experienced before. You came? Damon was saying to Krista, his voice manic and desperate. I knew you wouldn't let the kids suffer for your mistakes. I'm here, Krista said calmly. Let Raphael go. This is between us. Oh, it's much more complicated than that now, Damon replied, waving the gun erratically. See, I've had time to think while my life fell apart, and I realized something. You didn't just destroy my business, you destroyed me. So now I'm going to destroy something you love. Me? Krista asked. Fine, but let the boy go first. Not you. Damon's smile was insane. Him, your precious Craig. When he comes charging in here to save you, and he will because he's predictably heroic, I'm going to kill him right in front of you. As if summoned by his words, Craig stepped into the open, his hands raised but his eyes locked on Raphael. Let him go, Damon, Craig said quietly. Your fight is with us, not with a 4-year-old child. Daddy, Raphael cried out, struggling against his bonds. There he is, Damon said with sick satisfaction, turning the gun toward Craig. Right on schedule. You're right, Krista said suddenly, stepping between Damon and Craig. I did destroy your life. I systematically planned and executed your downfall because I wanted revenge for what you did to our daughter. And I'm not sorry." Damon's attention snapped back to her, his face contorting with rage. "You vindictive bitch. But you know what the difference is between us," Krista continued, her voice growing stronger. "I destroyed you with the truth. Everything I exposed was real. Your crimes, your corruption, your complete lack of human decency." "Shut up," Damon screamed, the gun wavering between Craig and Krista. In that moment of distraction, Craig moved. He lunged toward Raphael's chair while simultaneously tackling Damon around the waist. They hit the concrete floor hard, fighting for control of the weapon. "Run!" Craig shouted to Krista. "Get Raphael and run!" But instead of fleeing, Krista joined the fight, grabbing a metal pipe from the nearby equipment and swinging it at Damon's arm. The gun went flying, sliding across the warehouse floor. For a moment, it seemed like they had won. Craig had Damon pinned while Krista worked to untie Raphael. But Damon was stronger than his corporate exterior suggested, and desperation gave him a vicious edge. He managed to throw Craig off and scramble toward the gun. "No!" Krista screamed, but Damon was already raising the weapon. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. Craig felt the bullet tear through his chest, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a stack of wooden pallets. White-hot pain exploded through his body, and he could taste copper in his mouth as blood filled his lungs. "Craig!" Krista's screams seemed to come from very far away. Through his fading vision, Craig saw Gabriel appear in the warehouse entrance. The brave little boy had somehow slipped away from Mrs. Patterson and followed them. In his small hands was Craig's cell phone, and he was speaking frantically to someone. "My daddy is hurt," Gabriel was saying. "Please come help my daddy." The sight of both his sons, Raphael tied to the chair, Gabriel standing small and terrified in the doorway, gave Craig one last surge of strength. As Damon turned the gun toward Krista again, Craig forced himself to his feet and tackled the man one final time. This time, when they hit the ground, Craig made sure Damon's head connected hard with the concrete floor. The gun skittered away again, and Damon lay still. "Craig, oh God, Craig!" Krista was beside him, her hands pressed against the wound in his chest, as sirens wailed in the distance. "The boys," Craig whispered, his voice weak. "Are they—" "They're safe," Krista assured him, tears streaming down her face. "Gabriel called the police, and Raphael is okay. Just hold on, the ambulance is coming." Craig felt his strength ebbing away as Gabriel and Raphael both reached him, their small faces terrified but determined to help. He looked up at the three people who meant everything to him, his sons and the woman who had taught them all how to love again. "Take care of my boys," he whispered to Krista, echoing the words he'd spoken weeks ago when he first thought he was dying. "I love you." "You're going to take care of them yourself," Krista said fiercely. "Do you hear me? You're not leaving us. Not now. Not ever." As consciousness faded, Craig's last sight was of Gabriel and Raphael holding his hands while Krista pressed her jacket against his wound, all three of them refusing to let him go. In the distance, he could hear Damon being arrested. The threat finally ended. They had won, Craig realized as darkness closed in. They had protected their family, and Damon would never hurt anyone again. Now he just had to survive to enjoy the victory. The last thing he heard was Krista's voice, strong and unwavering. "Fight, Craig. Fight for us." Chapter 10. Phoenix Rising. The steady electronic beep of the heart monitor had become the soundtrack of Krista's existence. For 6 days and 7 hours, she had maintained an unwavering vigil beside Craig's bed, leaving only when Gabriel and Raphael needed her immediate attention. The boys had barely left the intensive care unit either, taking turns sleeping in the uncomfortable vinyl recliner, their small hands always maintaining contact with some part of their father. "Mama Krista," Raphael whispered on the morning of the 7th day, his voice hoarse from crying and the dry hospital air. "Why won't Daddy wake up? We've been really, really good." Krista looked down at the 4-year-old who had shown such incredible courage during his kidnapping ordeal, who had endured being tied up and terrified while refusing to give up hope. Now he sat beside Craig's bed in yesterday's dinosaur pajamas, wrinkled from sleeping in the hospital chair, his brown eyes, so much like his father's, filled with bone-deep fear. "The doctors said his body needs time to heal," Krista explained for the 100th time, brushing Raphael's hair back from his forehead. "Daddy was hurt very badly protecting us, and he needs to rest so he can get strong again." "But what if he doesn't?" Gabriel asked from his position on the other side of the bed. He had been the strong one, taking care of his brother, and even trying to comfort Krista when the grief threatened to overwhelm her. But exhaustion and fear were taking their toll on him too. "He will," Krista said with more confidence than she felt. "Your daddy is the strongest man I know. He fought off the bad man to protect all of us, and he's going to fight to come back to us too." Through the hospital room window, Krista could see reporters still lingering in the parking lot. The story had made national news, a construction worker's heroic rescue of his kidnapped son, the systematic takedown of a corrupt businessman, the love story that had emerged from tragedy. Damon's arrest and the revelation of his extensive criminal activities had dominated headlines for days. Federal prosecutors had wasted no time in filing additional charges against Damon. With the evidence Krista had provided and the kidnapping, he was facing life in prison without possibility of parole. His empire was completely destroyed, his assets seized, and his name would forever be associated with corruption and violence. Krista's revenge was complete, but it felt hollow while Craig fought for his life. "Mrs. Jansen?" Dr. Rodriguez entered the room quietly, clipboard in hand. The title still sounded strange to Krista's ears. She and Craig had been legally married in a brief courthouse ceremony 3 days after the shooting, with both boys serving as witnesses from Craig's bedside. It wasn't the garden wedding they had planned, but it meant everything to know that she was officially his wife. "How is he today?" Krista asked, though she knew from the machines and Craig's stillness that there was no change. "His vitals are stable, and the surgery sites are healing well," Dr. Rodriguez said carefully. "But the longer he remains unconscious, the more concerned we become about potential complications." Gabrielle and Raphael looked between the adults with the sharp awareness that children develop when they're forced to understand things beyond their years. Krista saw Gabrielle's lower lip tremble and immediately moved to gather both boys close. "Can you give us a few minutes alone with him?" she asked the doctor. After Dr. Rodriguez left, Krista sat on the edge of Craig's bed, taking his hand in hers. The engagement ring he'd given her caught the afternoon light, and she remembered the night he'd proposed, how certain they'd both been that their future was bright and secure. "Gabrielle, Raphael, come here," she said softly. The boys climbed onto the bed on either side of their father, careful not to disturb the tubes and wires. "I want you both to talk to Daddy. Tell him about your day. Tell him about the drawings you made him. Tell him anything you want." "But he can't hear us," Raphael protested. "I think he can," Krista said. "I think somewhere inside he's listening to everything we say. And I think he's fighting to come back to us because he knows how much we need him." Gabriel leaned close to Craig's ear. "Daddy, I helped Mama Krista make you pancakes this morning. The ones with chocolate chips that you like. She saved them in the refrigerator for when you wake up." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "And Raphael drew you a picture of our whole family with the sunflowers from Mama Elena's garden. And Mama Krista cries when she thinks we're not looking, but I think she's just scared like we are." Raphael added his own whispered words about the caterpillar they'd found that had turned into a butterfly, about how Mrs. Patterson had taught them to make cookies, about how much they missed their bedtime stories. Finally, Krista leaned down and spoke directly into Craig's ear, her voice thick with emotion. "I need you to come back to us, my love. I need you to wake up and see how brave your sons were, how they never gave up hope even when everything was scary. I need you to help me raise these beautiful boys and show them that love really does conquer everything." Her voice broke as she continued. "I can't do this without you, Craig. We're a family, and families stay together." She was crying freely now, her tears falling onto Craig's still face. "I love you so much it hurts. I love the way you make coffee in the morning and how you sing off-key in the shower. I love how you listen to every word the boys say like it's the most important thing in the world. I love your strength and your gentleness and the way you make me feel like I'm home wherever you are." Gabrielle and Raphael were crying too, their small bodies shaking with the weight of their fear and love. They all lay there together on the narrow hospital bed, a family holding vigil, refusing to surrender the man who had saved them all in different ways. The late afternoon sun streamed through the hospital room window, casting everything in golden light that made the moment feel almost sacred. That's when Craig's fingers moved. At first, Krista thought exhaustion was making her hallucinate. But then his hand turned in hers, his fingers interlacing with hers with unmistakable intention, the gesture so familiar and beloved that she gasped aloud. "Craig," she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Slowly, gradually, his eyes opened, unfocused at first, blinking against the afternoon light, but then finding her face with laser precision. When he tried to speak, only a rough whisper emerged, but Krista heard it clearly, heard the words that meant everything. "My family. My beautiful family." "Yes," she sobbed, pressing her face against his chest while Gabriel and Raphael carefully hugged him from both sides, their small bodies shaking with relief and joy, and the kind of desperate love that children feel when they almost lose a parent. "Your family. We're all here. We're all safe. We're all together." "The boys?" Craig's voice was stronger now, though still hoarse. "Safe," Krista assured him. "Raphael is okay. Gabriel was incredibly brave, and Damon can never hurt anyone again. It's over, my love. We won." Craig's eyes filled with tears as he looked at his sons, taking in their tear-streaked faces and the relief that was already replacing their fear. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I scared you." "You saved us, Daddy," Gabriel said simply. "You're a hero." "We're all heroes," Craig replied, his hand moving to touch each of their faces in turn. "We saved each other." The next few hours were a blur of medical tests, delighted doctors, and emotional phone calls to friends and family. Mrs. Patterson arrived with flowers from Eleanor's memorial garden, which had bloomed more beautifully than ever this year. Craig's business partners stopped by to report that Jansen Construction had more contracts than they could handle. But the most important moment came that evening, when they were finally alone as a family. Craig was sitting up in bed, still weak but clearly on the road to recovery, while Gabriel and Raphael took turns telling him everything that had happened during his unconsciousness. "I'm proud of both of you," Craig said, his arms around his sons. "You were so brave, and you took such good care of Mama Krista while I couldn't." "She took care of us too," Raphael said. "She didn't leave the hospital even once." "Not once," Craig repeated, looking at Krista with an expression of absolute love and gratitude. "Where else would I go?" Krista asked. "This is where my family was." A year later, they stood in their backyard on a perfect spring morning, surrounded by friends and family, as they renewed their wedding vows in the ceremony they had originally planned. Elena's memorial garden was in full bloom, the sunflowers towering above beds of roses and herbs that the boys tended with religious devotion. Gabrielle and Raphael, now 5 years old and even more inseparable than before, served as ring-bearers with the serious dignity of children who understood the importance of the moment. Craig bore scars from the shooting, thin white lines across his chest that Krista kissed every morning and evening, but they had only made him more precious to her. "I promise to love you through every season of our lives," Craig said as he held her hands, his voice strong and sure. "Through grief and joy, through fear and triumph, through every moment that life gives us together. I promise to fight for our love and our family with everything I have," Krista replied, her voice equally steady. "To choose hope over fear, healing over bitterness, and always, always to choose you." As they kissed to seal their renewed vows, Gabrielle and Raphael cheered, and their friends and family erupted in applause. But the most beautiful sound was the laughter that followed, pure, joyful, and full of life. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Craig and Krista stood together in Elena's garden, watching their sons chase butterflies among the flowers. "Do you think she would approve?" Craig asked, his arm around Krista's waist. "I think she would be grateful," Krista replied. "Grateful that her boys are loved and happy, that their father found someone who sees them as the amazing little people they are, that her memory is honored instead of forgotten." Craig pulled her closer, marveling again at how their love had grown from shared grief into something unbreakable. "I never thought I could be this happy again." "Neither did I," Krista admitted. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe love isn't about replacing what we've lost. It's about growing something new from the same soil." As if summoned by their words, Gabriel ran up to them, his face flushed with excitement. "Mama Krista, Daddy, come see. Raphael found another caterpillar, and we want to watch it turn into a butterfly." Hand in hand, they followed their sons deeper into the garden, where new life emerged from old growth, and beauty bloomed from the deepest sorrow. They were a family forged by fire, strengthened by trials, and bound together by a love that had literally conquered death. In the distance, Krista could hear the sound of children's laughter, the promise of forever, and the sweet certainty that some stories really do have happy endings. Their phoenix had risen from the ashes more beautiful than ever before, and they would spend the rest of their lives grateful for the miracle of finding each other in the darkness and choosing to build something luminous together. As the sun set over their celebration, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Craig and Krista knew with absolute certainty that they had not just survived their tragedies, they had transformed them into the foundation of a love story that would last for all the years to come.